Welcome to our deep dive, and this time you guys have sent us something a little different.
Yeah.
A full audiobook.
In Spanish, no less.
In Spanish.
On YouTube.
On YouTube.
Yeah.
So this is going to be fun. And this deep dive is all about Sun Tzu's The Art of War.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. It's amazing how this ancient text, still has relevance today. And, even in these kind of unexpected formats like this Spanish audiobook. And I think, we'll find that it's a lot more than just kind of, catchy quotes. It's really a deep well of strategic thinking that applies to way more than just the battlefield.
Yeah, absolutely. And for everybody listening out there, the audiobook is called El Arte de la Guerra, audiolibro en español completo Sun Tzu.
Okay.
From the YouTube channel. Biblionarraciones.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where we're going deep on this one. And one of the things that really struck me right off the bat is, Sun Tzu doesn't really pull any punches. He kind of gets right into it and says that war is a life or death matter for a nation.
Yeah, absolutely. He doesn't sugarcoat it. War is, the ultimate test for Sun Tzu of a state's leadership and its people's resilience.
Yeah.
It's a path that leads to either survival or utter ruin.
Right.
And to navigate this treacherous path, he lays out these 5 crucial factors.
Okay.
Doctrine, time, terrain, leadership, and discipline.
Okay, 5 factors. I'm already feeling like I need to be taking notes.
Yeah. They're all pretty complex.
Yeah, they're all interconnected too, right?
Yeah, they are. Think of it as kind of like interconnected gears in a strategic machine.
Right.
So doctrine, for instance, is all about ensuring that everyone from the ruler to the foot soldier is united behind this common vision.
Yeah.
Then you've got time, not just in terms of hours and days, but understanding the seasons, the weather, even the time of day, and how those impact your actions.
And terrain, that's got to be more than just knowing like where the mountains and rivers are.
It's about using it to your advantage, understanding distances, choke points, and how to exploit the natural features to kind of outmaneuver your opponent. Almost like the terrain itself becomes a weapon in your arsenal.
Okay, so we've got doctrine, time, terrain, leadership. What kind of bar are we setting for leadership here?
Yeah, he's got pretty high standards.
Yeah.
He lists wisdom, sincerity, benevolence, courage, and strictness as the essential qualities.
Sounds like a lot.
It is a tall order, but those qualities are vital for inspiring trust and obedience in an army. And then, of course, you've got discipline, which is the bedrock of any well-organized force. And this encompasses everything from clear hierarchies and communication channels to managing supplies and, interestingly, even military expenses.
Wow. So it's not just about like having a bunch of like really brave warriors. It's about having a whole machine that functions well.
Yeah. And Sun Tzu emphasizes that mastering these 5 factors is the key to victory.
Okay.
He even provides 7 pointed questions to assess your strengths and weaknesses compared to the enemy.
7 questions. Okay.
Yeah, it's like a strategic checklist for any leader to evaluate their position.
So give me an example of one of the questions.
So he asks things like, which ruler possesses a deeper understanding of doctrine and strategic planning?
Okay.
Who commands the more capable leaders? Which army holds the advantage in terms of terrain and weather conditions?
Right.
On which side is discipline more rigorously enforced?
Okay.
Which army boasts superior strength?
Wow.
Who has the better trained officers and troops? And finally, which side offers more consistent and appropriate rewards and punishments?
Wow, those are some tough questions. It really seems like he's pushing leaders to not just sort of like charge into battle blindly, but to really like take stock of themselves and their opponent.
Exactly. He's advocating for a very thoughtful and measured approach to conflict.
Right.
One that prioritizes thorough assessment and planning over rash action.
Absolutely. And I think that leads us to another point that really resonated with me from this audiobook was his emphasis on avoiding prolonged warfare.
Yeah.
Because he's right. The economic strain of a long war is...
Oh, it's bad news.
It's devastating. And he really paints a picture of, it's not just the loss of life, but it's the drain on resources.
Yeah.
The prices skyrocketing.
Yeah, and the burden on the people.
It's almost like a slow, agonizing death for a nation.
It kind of reminds me of that saying, winning the battle, but losing the war.
Yeah, yeah.
And it seems like Sun Tzu is arguing that even if you achieve military victory after this really protracted conflict, the cost might be so high that your state is crippled and unable to really benefit from this so-called victory.
Right.
And he uses a really powerful image to drive this point home.
I think I remember this one. Was it something about fire?
Yes. He compares an army to a fire.
Right.
If you do not put it out, he says, it will consume itself.
Yeah.
And a skilled army, according to Sun Tzu, doesn't need to be repeatedly remobilized or restocked.
Right.
Swift, decisive action is crucial, and a wise general prioritizes disrupting the enemy's supplies to try to hasten the end.
Yeah, that's a really vivid analogy.
Yeah.
It makes you realize that, like, even if you have, superior numbers or weaponry, like, time can be your enemy in war.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Prolonging a conflict only amplifies your vulnerabilities and weakens your position.
And that actually leads us, I think, to one of the most intriguing and perhaps controversial aspects of his philosophy, which is this concept of winning without fighting.
Yeah.
This is where the art of war, for me, really starts to get interesting.
It seems paradoxical, but it's at the core of his strategic brilliance. Think of it like a chess game.
Okay.
The highest form of victory is dismantling your opponent's strategy before they even make a move.
So outsmarting them, not just overpowering them.
And the second best victory is preventing them from regrouping or consolidating their forces.
Okay.
And only as a last resort should you engage in direct confrontation.
Right.
And this is where his advice on attacking fortified cities comes into play.
Yeah, he really does not paint a good picture of siege warfare.
Sieges are a gamble.
Yeah.
With incredibly high stakes.
Yeah, costly, time-consuming, and ultimately, like, just a drain on your resources and morale.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So the ideal approach, according to Sun Tzu, is disrupting the enemy's plans.
Okay.
Capturing their cities without these protracted sieges and achieving victory with minimal campaigning.
Right.
That's how you preserve the strength of your army and the stability of your state.
Wow. So it's fascinating how he emphasizes this efficiency and this minimizing of losses, even in the midst of war.
It's a testament to his understanding of the true cost of conflict.
Yeah, absolutely.
But achieving this kind of strategic victory requires a deep understanding of another key principle.
Okay.
Deception.
Deception. I mean, this is where I think he really challenges us to think outside the box a little bit.
He advocates for being a master illusionist.
He really does. He talks about appearing weak when you're strong.
Right.
Appearing far away when you're close, constantly luring the enemy into traps. It's almost like a game of smoke and mirrors, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah.
And that's what makes it so effective.
Yeah.
It's all about creating the opposite impression of what your enemy expects.
Yeah.
Keeping them off balance and exploiting their confusion. And he even talks about using what he calls direct tactics as a smokescreen while relying on indirect maneuvers for the true victory.
So the direct tactics are almost like a distraction.
Right.
And then the indirect ones are the ones that deliver the real knockout punch.
Exactly.
Pretty sneaky.
But that's the beauty of it. Yeah. He compares this combination of direct and indirect tactics to like the harmonious blend of musical notes.
Okay.
Or the interplay of colors. They create these endless possibilities on the battlefield.
It's really fascinating how he uses these metaphors from nature.
He does.
To really illustrate these concepts.
Yeah, yeah.
And speaking of nature, he also has a lot to say about terrain, doesn't he?
He does.
And I thought it was really interesting that even though this is a Spanish audiobook, he still emphasizes the importance of having local guides.
Absolutely. He recognizes that even if you have a theoretical understanding of a battlefield's layout, you need people with local expertise to truly grasp its nuances.
Right. Because there might be things that aren't on the map.
Exactly.
Right. Subtle changes in elevation, hidden paths, or whatever it might be.
Things like the quality of the soil.
Right. Yeah.
Can make all the difference in a strategic maneuver.
So a truly skilled general isn't just a master of troops and weapons, but also a master of the environment.
Yeah, a master of reading the situation.
Right. And speaking of mastering information, the audiobook dedicates a whole chapter to spies.
It does.
Clearly for Sun Tzu, war isn't just about brute force.
No, not at all. Information is the lifeblood of warfare.
Okay.
And he breaks down these 5 types of spies.
Okay.
Local, internal, double agents, expendable, and surviving.
Wow.
And each one plays a crucial role in gathering intel and providing that strategic advantage.
And he really stresses the importance of treating your spies well.
Yes.
Keeping them close, rewarding them handsomely.
Yes.
Yeah, it sounds like dangerous but vital work.
Absolutely. A wise ruler, according to Sun Tzu, cultivates this network of spies to understand the enemy's plans, their vulnerabilities, and even the names of their key personnel.
Wow, so it's about having eyes and ears everywhere.
It is.
Anticipating those threats and making informed decisions.
Precisely.
Wow, this deep dive has already given us a lot to think about.
Yeah.
And I think it's really fascinating how these principles, even though they were written centuries ago, still feel so relevant today.
It's the enduring power of Sun Tzu's work.
Yeah.
It transcends the battlefield and speaks to the core of human strategy.
Yeah.
Whether it's in business, negotiations, or even personal relationships.
Yeah, it's like a framework for understanding conflict and competition in all its forms.
Absolutely.
But this is just the beginning of our exploration.
Yeah.
We've only just scratched the surface of Sun Tzu's wisdom.
Yeah, we'll dive even further into the intricacies of the art of war in the next part of our deep dive.
Excellent. Can't wait.
Uncovering more of its hidden gems.
Yeah.
And exploring how these principles can be applied to the challenges we face in the 21st century.
All right. I'm ready when you are. So we've talked about this idea of, gathering information and deception. But one thing I've been wondering about is how do we apply these ideas ethically?
Oh, that's a really good question.
Yeah, because...
And it's something that continues to be debated.
Yeah.
Even today. I mean, Sun Tzu doesn't really offer any explicit ethical guidelines.
Right.
But I think his focus on minimizing harm and achieving victory with the least amount of bloodshed suggests at least, a certain kind of pragmatic morality.
It's like he's saying that the best way to be ethical in war is to avoid it altogether if possible, or at least end it as swiftly as possible.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And when it comes to things like deception, I think it's important to remember that context matters.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's a big difference between using strategic maneuvering in a business negotiation versus spreading misinformation that could harm innocent people.
Right. So it's about using these principles responsibly and being mindful of the potential consequences of our actions. Kind of like that Spider-Man quote, right?
Exactly.
With great power comes great responsibility.
Yeah.
Okay, so shifting gears a bit, I want to circle back to something we touched on earlier, which is this concept of terrain. And I think Sun Tzu's analysis of terrain goes beyond just like the physical geography.
Yeah.
He seems to be talking about understanding the entire landscape of a conflict.
Yeah.
Including the psychological and emotion terrain.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point.
So it's not just about knowing, the mountains and the rivers, but also knowing the fears, the motivations, the weaknesses of your opponent as well as your own.
Yeah, he really emphasizes the importance of knowing yourself as well as your enemy.
Right. Know thy enemy.
And that means understanding your own strengths and limitations as well as your emotional tendencies.
Oh, interesting.
Under pressure.
Yeah.
Like, do you tend to become reckless when you're angry, or do you freeze up when you're faced with these unexpected challenges?
Right.
Knowing these things about yourself can be just as crucial as knowing the enemy's battle plans.
So know thy enemy and know thyself.
Exactly. And he takes this concept a step further. He argues that a truly skilled leader can actually manipulate the terrain, both physical and psychological, to their advantage.
Okay.
So this could mean creating diversions to draw the enemy into a trap, or spreading rumors to sow discord among their ranks.
It's like playing 3D chess. You're not just moving the pieces on the board, you're shaping the board itself.
Exactly.
And this brings us back to the idea of spies.
Yeah.
Which we discussed earlier.
Right.
They play a key role in gathering that intelligence that's needed to understand and manipulate this terrain.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
They're the eyes and ears of a wise ruler, providing invaluable insights into the enemy's movements, their intentions, even their state of mind.
Yeah.
And he emphasizes having a diverse network of spies, each with their own strengths and areas of expertise.
Give me some examples. So local spies provide that ground-level intelligence.
Internal spies infiltrate the enemy's ranks. Double agents sow confusion and misinformation.
Right.
And expendable spies can be sacrificed to protect more valuable assets.
So he really breaks down this art of espionage into a very systematic and strategic approach.
It's fascinating.
It makes you realize that intelligence gathering is just as important as military, maybe even more so.
He even talks about treating your spies well.
Right.
Rewarding them generously. Yeah. Protecting your identities.
Makes sense. You wouldn't want to betray someone who's risking their life to bring you vital information.
It's a high-stakes game.
Yeah.
With a lot of trust involved.
It is, for sure. But, one thing that strikes me about all this is how relevant this feels today.
Yeah.
Even though this was written centuries ago.
It's the beauty of Sun Tzu's work. It speaks to these timeless principles of strategy and human nature that transcends any particular era or battlefield.
So how can we apply these principles to the challenges that we face in the 21st century? I mean, we're not exactly facing off against, rival armies on horseback anymore.
Well, that's true, but the battlefields have just shifted.
Okay.
Right? We might be fighting for market share in the business world, or negotiating a peace treaty in the political arena, or even just trying to navigate a difficult personal relationship.
Right.
But the principles of knowing yourself, understanding your opponent, and adapting to this ever-changing terrain remain as relevant as ever.
So it's about seeing the world through this strategic lens.
Exactly.
Even in situations that might not seem like a battle at first glance.
Think about it. How many times have you been caught off guard in a negotiation because you underestimated your opponent's motivation?
More times than I care to admit.
Or made a rash decision based on incomplete information.
For sure. And knowing these teachings now, I'm starting to see how even those everyday situations can benefit from a bit of strategic thinking. Like, maybe next time I'm heading into like a tough conversation, I'll take a moment to consider the terrain.
Right.
Both emotionally and in terms of like the other person's perspective.
That's a great example. And that's what makes this deep dive so rewarding. It's not just about learning ancient history. It's about gaining these practical tools that can help us navigate the complexities of modern life.
Absolutely. But with that said, I think it's also important to remember that the art of war isn't like a rule book to be followed blindly.
No, it's more like a compass that can guide our thinking and help us make more informed decisions.
Yeah, absolutely. And like any tool, it can be used for good or for ill.
Right.
So it's ultimately up to each individual to decide how to apply these principles.
Absolutely.
In a way that aligns with their own values and ethics.
I couldn't agree more.
Yeah, that's a really important point. I mean, we can't just take these ideas and run with them without considering those ethical implications. Like we talked about earlier, context matters.
Yeah.
But, one thing I'm kind of curious about is whether Sun Tzu's teachings have been applied in modern warfare. Like, has anyone actually used these strategies successfully in recent conflicts?
That's a fascinating question.
Yeah.
And it's one that military historians and strategists continue to debate.
Right, because some would argue that his principles are timeless.
Exactly.
And universal.
Right.
And others might say, well, the nature of warfare has changed so much that his teachings are no longer relevant.
Right. It's almost like this nature versus nurture debate.
Right.
But for military strategy.
Yeah, exactly. So are great military leaders born, or are they shaped by the teachings of masters like Sun Tzu?
Yeah.
That's a tough question.
It's a really complex question.
It is. But it makes you wonder, has there been any like modern general who has sort of consciously studied and applied Sun Tzu's principles?
Yeah. I mean, there are certainly examples of military leaders who have drawn inspiration from the art of war. But it's hard to say definitively whether their successes can be directly attributed to his teachings or to other factors.
Yeah, for sure.
Right.
But, I mean, is there anyone who comes to mind?
Well, for example, General Von Nguyen Giap, the Vietnamese military commander who led the defeat of both the French and the Americans, was known to be a student of Sun Tzu.
Wow, that's pretty incredible. To think that a centuries-old text could have influenced the outcome of some of the most significant conflicts.
It's amazing.
Of the 20th century.
It really is a testament to the enduring power of his insights.
For sure, and it shows how even in the age of modern technology and sophisticated weaponry, that the principles of strategy and human psychology remain fundamental to warfare.
Absolutely.
Well, this is all incredibly thought-provoking.
Yeah.
And I'm sure our listeners are eager to hear more about how these ideas can be applied to their own lives.
Well, in the final part of our deep dive, we'll explore some specific examples of how Sun Tzu's principles can be used to navigate challenges in business, relationships, and personal growth.
All right, sounds good. All right, so we've covered a lot of ground here.
We have.
In our exploration of Sun Tzu's The Art of War, from the 5 key factors for success to the power of deception, the importance of terrain and spies. I mean, it's like we've been given this masterclass in strategic thinking, but how do we actually put these principles into practice in our everyday lives?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Yeah. And I think the key is understanding that his teachings aren't just about, winning battles on a physical battlefield. Right. It's about winning in any arena where conflict or competition exists.
So whether we're negotiating a salary raise, trying to convince our kids to eat their vegetables, or even just like trying to get ahead in a crowded subway car, there's something to be learned from Sun Tzu.
Absolutely. Remember, he emphasizes knowing yourself and your opponent, assessing the terrain, and choosing your battles wisely.
Right.
These are principles that you can apply to any situation where you're trying to achieve a goal or overcome an obstacle.
Yeah. I'm starting to see how this all ties together. Is like he's giving us this framework for thinking strategically, regardless of the specific challenge that we're facing. But can you give us some concrete examples of how these principles might actually play out in real-world situations?
Yeah, let's take the example of a business negotiation.
Okay.
Imagine you're trying to secure a major contract with a new client.
Okay.
Applying Sun Tzu's principles, you wouldn't just barge in and lay out your best offer right away.
Right.
You'd take the time to assess the terrain.
So you would do your research on the client, their needs, their past deals, maybe even like their negotiation style.
Exactly. You try to understand their motivations, their strengths and weaknesses. And just as importantly, you take stock of your own position, your leverage, your bottom line, and your willingness to walk away if the deal isn't favorable.
Yeah. So it's like you're gathering intelligence before you engage in this like battle of the negotiation. And you might even employ a bit of deception. Right?
Yeah.
Not in a dishonest way, but maybe by strategically withholding certain information until the right moment.
Precisely. Sun Tzu talks about appearing weak when you're strong or feigning disinterest to gain an advantage.
Right. So it's a bit like playing poker. You don't want to show all your cards right away.
Yeah, you want to keep your opponent guessing.
Right. But ultimately, like the goal is to achieve a win-win situation, right? You want a deal that benefits both parties.
Exactly. And that's where his emphasis on choosing your battles wisely comes into play.
Okay.
Sometimes the most strategic move is to walk away from a negotiation that's not in your best interest.
And that takes discipline, though. Because it's easy to get caught up in the heat of the moment and make a decision that you'll later regret.
Exactly. And that's why he stresses the importance of having a clear strategy and sticking to it, even when things get tough.
This has been so eye-opening. I'm already starting to see how I can apply these principles
in
my own life. But before we wrap up, I have one final question.
Okay.
Sun Tzu wrote The Art of War centuries ago. Do you think his teachings are still relevant in the 21st century? Especially in a world that's, increasingly dominated by technology and globalization?
That's a great question, and I think the answer is a resounding yes. While the tools and tactics of warfare have certainly evolved, the fundamental principles of strategy and human psychology remain timeless. Just as his teachings could be applied to a battle fought with, swords and arrows, they can also be applied to a cyber attack, a political campaign, or even a social media war.
So even though the battlefield has changed, the rules of engagement remain the same.
In many ways, yes. Understanding your opponent, anticipating their moves, adapting to that ever-changing terrain. These are principles that will always be relevant regardless of the specific context. And perhaps even more importantly, his teachings remind us that the best victories are often those achieved without a fight. Diplomacy, negotiation, the ability to find common ground. These are skills that are more valuable than ever in our interconnected world.
That's a really powerful message to end on. It seems like his wisdom isn't just about winning wars. It's about preventing them in the first place. And that's something we can all strive for in our own lives and in the world at large.
Exactly. And remember, as Sun Tzu reminds us, the greatest victory is that which requires no battle.
Well, thank you so much for guiding us through this deep dive into the world of the art of war.
It's been my pleasure.
It's been a truly enlightening journey. And for our listeners out there, we encourage you to keep exploring Sun Tzu's work. There's a wealth of wisdom to be discovered in its pages, wisdom that can help you navigate the complexities of life and achieve victory in all your endeavors.